What's up everybody, this is Ven, and I welcome you to the MOC Spotlight, where we take apart what you build. For today's episode, we'll be going over a creation called Sigma, created by Guy That Likes Red, found on Flickr. Now of course, before we get started, let me tell you about my method of reviewing, which involves a point system that is based on 3 fundamental attributes: the overall appearance of the MOC, the build of the MOC itself, and the concept and ideas behind the MOC's creation. Each quality will mount up to 5 points, leading up to a final score that will be determined at the end of the episode. And please remember, this is all based on my opinion. So let's get this started. Now once again, we have a fairly big MOC. Aside from its incredible height, the one thing that actually grabbed my attention was the design of this thing's head. So let's go ahead and take a look at that real quick. Now, man, just look at that. So much detail thrown into this, and so much system. Interesting technique, but it does work. It made for a very unique shape, and the courtesy of adding details. Some as small as these eyes, or well, I'm assuming these are eyes, because I don't think anything else could be eyes. But anyway, the positives about this head design are pretty much evident in the rest of the MOC, where everything else pretty much has this smooth and shapely aesthetic to it, while also having a good bit of detail added to it to make it less plain. However, what is a little bit jarring to me is that most of the MOC is constructed from CCBS and Technic, which kind of conflicts with the aesthetic of system parts. And for the most part, it seems as though this complication has been worked around, but there are still some points of the MOC that just don't look right. And the biggest example would be the midsection of the torso here, where you can see these system parts still have these protruding studs that add a whole new texture to the overall aesthetic, and it is not present anywhere else. So we have an inconsistency here that doesn't really look all too good, because the rest of the white parts on this MOC are mostly smooth in texture, so having this here just doesn't work. And if you look hard enough, there are other instances like this present on the MOC, but they are actually not all too noticeable, so I guess it's not much of a hindrance to the MOC's appearance, but it's still kind of a problem to take note of. It's also pretty obvious that this MOC has some fairly unorthodox proportions, at least for a humanoid figure. You know, you got these extremely long freaking arms, these short thighs, and calves that don't even compare to the rest of the MOC in size. Also, need I mention this really long torso, which admittedly looks really cool in its own merit. And while unorthodox these proportions may be, I can actually kind of forgive it because they just don't look awkward to me. Like usually when a MOC has proportions that are off, it really looks off. It looks awkward. This was a criticism with the Toei Nika, that they had gorilla arms. And while these cases could be forgiven if you argued that, you know, the characters' designs aren't based on human proportions or anatomy in general, then fine, you know, that's cool and all. Fine, that's a decent argument to make, but it still just doesn't look good, at least to some people. But anyway, back to Sigma. Sigma looks fine, in my opinion. I think it works. It really sells the overall silhouette of the figure, and really adds a good bit of character to it too. And with a couple of final notes, Sigma overall looks pretty good. Like, I enjoy this design quite a lot. It has a consistent color scheme, and it has a design that just kind of reminds me of something out of Warframe, or I don't know, it seems to be very inspired and creative. I even like these gigantic toes that the thing has. I don't know, maybe I'm a little weird, but if you've been following this series for as long as you have, you're probably a lot weirder than I am, TBH. Now, as far as the build goes, I can already tell that this MOC is really well constructed. It doesn't seem to be the cleanest job, but it does its job really well. The legs seem to follow a very typical CCBS build, while the rest of the torso and everything else have a lot of custom structural integrity to it. And while it does look pretty good, I did notice a couple of things about the arms that don't really sit well with me. First of all, let's look at these shoulders. Okay, so there's a friction piece attached to a ball piece that's attached to another ball piece. Now that's pretty cool because that gives this figure a wider range of motion when it comes to the shoulders. But I do worry that the socket that actually connects to the torso might not be enough to hold up these heavy looking arms. So yeah, I don't know about that, but what I do know is that these elbows do not look all too secure. If you look hard enough, you'll notice that this piece is what is connecting both parts of the arm together. You know, this is technically the elbow and it looks to have a solid connection to the forearm. However, only one of the axles on this piece is connecting it to the upper arm, and that doesn't seem so secure. That's a really short axle, and it seems like it could just pop off if you try to adjust the elbow somehow. So yeah, no, that's definitely a problem. And I guess that's pretty much where the problems with this MOC's build can be put to rest, because everything else looks really solid. Even the system-based head looks like it has a solid connection to the rest of the body. I still remain fairly skeptical about the usage of system parts on builds like this, because it seems like, you know, they can just pop off at any moment. But I guess aside from the panels on the front of the torso, there's not much else I can really be worried about. Also, surprisingly, this MOC looks to be really well articulated in just a whole bunch of different areas. Even the fingers have freaking articulation. It's crazy. However, it does seem as though the bending at the knees limited because of this armor piece behind the thighs and how it just kind of stretches downward towards the knees. That doesn't look like that helps out all too much. So yeah, overall it's a pretty solid build, but there are still some things that could have been done better. Also, a function might have been nice. Maybe like include a weapon for this guy, or make these claws capable of doing something other than just looking cool. I don't know. Something like that probably would have been a cool idea. And speaking of cool ideas, let's move on to the concepts, because this is a really cool concept for a thing. Okay, no, I actually don't know like the big idea behind this MOC or anything. I just know that the builder intended on using a good bit of system in this build. And I gotta say, I'm really happy that the system in this MOC does not involve the actual structural integrity, and instead it's just used for aesthetic. Like, I'm so glad that's the case. And like I said earlier, for the most part this is done pretty well. However, it could have been done better so as to not clash with the textures of the rest of the MOC. I mean, come on, these panels on the front here, they just doesn't work. Now, this was a cool idea and all, but it just doesn't really look all too good. However, that's probably the only big thing that struck me as like an idea that wasn't executed pretty well, because for the rest of this MOC, everything looks really cool. You know, I like the idea behind this design and how unorthodox these proportions are. I really enjoy the design of the head and this overall imposing figure that was put together. I think there are some pretty cool ideas thrown into this MOC, and I can't really complain all too much. And you know, like I've been saying, I just think some things could have been done better. And I suppose there is room to add more to the MOC, but I do appreciate its design for what it is, so you know, not much else I can really comment on. Let's move on to the final scores. So in terms of appearance, this MOC receives a 4 out of 5. I really enjoy the design of this MOC, but I do think it could use a good bit of polishing and refining in some areas. Like, okay, these panels just kill me. The more I look at them, the more I feel a little disappointed that these could have been done better. Okay, nah, it's not that bad. Don't feel bad. Again, just one of those things that could be improved on to make the overall design look a lot more concise. Now, as far as the build goes, gotta give this a 4 out of 5. For the most part, this MOC looks structurally sound and everything, but I do think some parts also could be reworked, like the arms, for instance. The connection on the elbow should not be this barren, and there is that problem with the legs that kind of restricts movement. But aside from these issues, this is pretty well constructed, and it displays a pretty intuitive usage of parts. Similarly to what I've been saying for the appearance of the MOC, I think it could use a good bit of polishing in the build as well. As far as the concept goes, I give it another 4 out of 5. Because all in all, I think the design that the builder had in mind was well represented in his creation. However, there is still room to improve and make the MOC not only better looking, but also better built. So, you know, just keeping the score pretty consistent here. And thus, we are left with the final score of 12 out of 15. Though I have stated that this MOC could be improved in several areas, that doesn't mean that the MOC is bad. It looks really good. Just, you know, as it goes with almost every other creation, there are some obvious qualities that could be done a little bit better. So, all in all, great job, guy that likes red. This is a really interesting and creative MOC to take a look at, and I am curious to hear about what may have inspired it. Well, hope to see more out of you and possibly hear from you. and I do hope to see something out of you viewers. So if you think you have a shot at taking the spotlight for a week, post your own creation to the message boards at board.ttvpodcast.com. Just look for the LEGO Creations category, post pictures there, and hopefully it comes across my attention. And if I deem it interesting enough, I'll throw it up on a spotlight. And if not, it's still worth showing off your creations to other people and getting feedback from them. It doesn't have to be me. So I hope to see you there. And if not, then I'll see you all next time.